Welcome to this week's edition of the 6-5 podcast. I'm Patrick Moorhead with Moor Insights Strategy, and I am joined by my famous co-host, Daniel Newman from Futurum Research. Daniel, we may not be together, but we will never be apart, at least digitally, when it comes to the 6-5 podcast.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Our last episode, we did it in the same room. Socially distanced, although our camera angles maybe didn't reflect that, but that's because our technology is pretty awesome. I'm glad to be back home. It's nice, but it was nice to get out. It was nice to get to Austin. Love that city. Hope to make it home for me in the not too distant future. But yeah, buddy, it's good to be back. And by the way, famous. I don't know who you're calling famous. I'm pretty sure I turned on CNBC and I saw your face last week, not mine, Mr. Famous.
Listen, it just depends on the week, Daniel. I mean, we're both nerd famous, but when it comes to Austin, I think it sounds pretty good, right? We've got Elon Musk and Gigafactory, Joe Rogan, and Daniel Newman. I think that's a pretty lethal trifecta. So
I love it, dude.
But hey, let's dive in here. And just for a reminder, if you're new to the show, the 6-5 represents 6 incredible topics that we do for 5 minutes each. We analyze things. We don't spout out news. You can get that pretty much anywhere. Also, do not take any of this content and use this as investment advice. It's truly for information and maybe even entertainment purposes only. And that's particularly important when we get into earnings seasons, because Daniel, we are going to talk about earnings and some other topics. So let's dive in here. So first off, Microsoft earnings. Going into COVID, this was the first COVID edition, 3 months of Microsoft. How would they do? How did they do, Daniel?
Yeah, Pat, I remember 3 months ago looking at it and going, well, these numbers aren't really COVID, because there were a lot of pre-COVID data, although China had definitely seen the hit, the US hadn't, and the numbers were good. And guess what? I think I heard some guy on CNBC say, Microsoft's COVID proof.
What idiot?
Even been you.
What idiot would say that?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't maybe go that far, but let's just say a beat on earnings, a beat on revenue, and across the company's more than 10 or so product and service lines, growth in all except for search ads. And so basically that means the company is doing pretty well. A couple areas, Pat, that I've paid a particular close attention to. Cloud, how did Azure do? 47% growth. A little bit off because it had been hovering closer to 60. But of course, we had to expect there would be some fall off with COVID being fully baked in. I mean, remember, Pat, we had a full month of almost nothing where business literally stopped. Gaming, which was an area that, of course, we expected explosive growth, and we got it, 65% growth, which is over 2% last quarter, and negative growth 1 year ago during this same period of time. And another area that was really interesting, and I wrote a piece on Market Watch about this too, was the Dynamics business. They, for the first time, split Dynamics from the Power Platform, announced it as a $3 billion business. And we saw growth of the Dynamics 365, the cloud business, that was up near 40%. So those are a few of the areas. And of course, Pat, across the company, teams and other areas were, very strong. Teams went from 11 million to 77 or 76 million users over a 2-month period of time. Listen, this should be really encouraging. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are sort of, wanting to make sure that the world understands the direness of what's going on with the pandemic. But tech is doing really well, and it should make people happy that business is good, because this means jobs are going to be secure. This means learning can continue to happen. This means families can feed themselves. And so, of course, it's only one company, but companies like Microsoft and Amazon, which are coming up this week, they're bellwethers, Pat.
Yeah, gosh, it's almost like Microsoft is COVID proof. Huh. Anyway, this is reinforcement that, first off, you have to realize that the things that get biggest hit, that are getting hit right now, are consumer plays. Okay, discretionary consumer plays, which is why we see airlines, energy companies going in the dumps. I mean, if it's optional, hotels, then they're getting slaughtered. But Microsoft is one of these companies that is a requirement. You can't just, if you're a business, just turn off Office 365 or Microsoft 365 or Dynamics. If you want to remain in business, you need to keep Microsoft plugged in. I do, though, on Azure, I do believe that we won't see, it has been on a constant slide for almost 16 quarters from a percentage basis. And that's due to the numbers getting bigger.
Yeah.
I don't expect any big percentage growths. And yeah.
I just want to jump in there, Pat. I think you're absolutely right. Law of large numbers. And when we hit on Amazon and AWS next week, we're going to probably have this same conversation. I guess my big question was, it had sort of really sat about 65% for like 4 straight quarters, kind of up and down a little bit. And then it dropped significantly. And so the question is, can the company return closer to 60? I don't see it returning into the triple digits or anything. It's just, is that fall going to be permanent, or was that marked by a single quarter, more of an anomaly? Because keeping it closer to 60 is important as it chases the AWS number, because AWS is still hovering around 30 and above, and has a bigger IaaS number.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of round out that thought, I'm even considering getting away from growth percentages when it comes to big IaaS. I think finally, I think when it comes to big digital transformation projects, that those are being delayed a little bit, and for understandable reasons. And I think that is going to hit some of the major cloud numbers. Now, it's not hitting things like SaaS, because again, it's like turning things on and off. It's just tough. But to roll out a project that is SaaS versus IaaS, where you're building the application on top of that, I think it's two different things. So good analysis on that, Daniel. Let's jump into the rumor that Nvidia could acquire ARM. And a little backstory on this. ARM is owned by SoftBank. And, SoftBank got really, really hurt with WeWork and Uber investments, which have really put the pressure on how do they monetize ARM. And we always knew that ARM would go public. We just didn't know how it would go. And now it seems like SoftBank is shopping ARM. And if you think about Nvidia as a potential suitor, I think it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. So first off, Nvidia is a GPU and just became a networking play with their big acquisition. But they are shipping, interestingly enough, AMD CPUs in their solutions. And I would see a big revenue potential uptick that instead of shipping an AMD or an Intel CPU with every one of its GPU solutions, how about its own custom ARM solution? NVIDIA knows how to do custom ARM CPUs, as it has cranked out 2 to 3, but they have not been industry winning in the data center. But with ARM, they could pretty much do everything. This could also get NVIDIA to be able to monetize mobility, which is a big fat goose egg right now. For NVIDIA, they ironically, the first year I entered this business, NVIDIA won the best of CES from their smartphone SoC. But they've subsequently punted. They exited that business, and at least the press release said they were getting into the IP game. But so far, there are 0 mobile licensees of NVIDIA GPU technology. But ironically, AMD is licensing Samsung mobile GPU IP. So net, big opportunity. But boy, every one of ARM's big-time licensees have out clauses. Listeners may not know that, but if ARM gets acquired, you have the ability to dump the contract or renegotiate the contract based on that. And that just seems awful messy.
Yeah, you'd think there's going to have to be a lot of diligence done on NVIDIA's part to make sure what is being acquired, because ARM is really a licensing engine, not itself the chip maker. It's got this intellectual property that's developed, and it enables the development of these chips, and it's become a player in pretty much every type of chip space, especially in custom, ASICs and CPUs, the whole ACPC movement, mobile chips, and it basically immediately puts NVIDIA in every area that it's not. And all of a sudden, NVIDIA really starts lining up much more closely with its biggest competitors across the board, the Intels, the AMDs, the Qualcomms, and even Huawei's, all of them suddenly, and then NVIDIA, which, by the way, I mean, the company's been on a tear. Its performance versus the semiconductor industry has been off the charts this year. Its innovation in AI has been quite impressive as well, but it hasn't really sunk its teeth into more of your everyday traditional computing. It's really been big GPU and high performance computing, and that's kind of been in gaming. And that's and ADAS. I got to keep going and. But this move itself just suddenly changes the whole dynamics of the company. And I think the company, there's a market love affair with NVIDIA. Its investors have seen tremendous returns. I think people could get really behind it. And let's talk about another side of this analysis, Pat, is SoftBank's had some problems in the last couple of years. And while ARM has been a consistent good performer for the company, one of its biggest money makers in WeWork, and a company that SoftBank had expected a huge return on, literally lost like 90% of its value. So that's not to say that SoftBank's desperate, but let's just say that there is an opportunity that right now a company like NVIDIA may be able to see a significant discount on a company that's really performing well, that could diversify its business, that could instantaneously put it into new markets, create new licensing agreements, and opportunities. But your last comment, Pat, is the key, is in the diligence process. Is NVIDIA going to be seen as too much of a threat to a lot of the people who use ARM right now and license ARM to necessarily continue the relationship? And how much impact would that have on the value? Because if Jensen and the NVIDIA team lost all the licensing agreements in the process of gaining the IP, it wouldn't be worth nearly what I'm sure SoftBank's going to want.
Yeah, and if you look at the mess that both of our companies have researched with Qualcomm related to IP, and everybody like market defining, Apple got it through the door, in a last minute effort by defining a market I had never heard of, which was high performance mobile SoCs. And you can imagine somebody like Intel complaining that, hey, even though I have 95% of the server CPU market, NVIDIA has 99% of GPU compute, and all compute's the same. But anyways, it'll be interesting to see the tricks that go on there.
I love rumors like this, though, buddy. I just do. This is what makes our job a lot of fun, is speculation.
It is. Informed speculation is our favorite, though. Boom. So let's move to another earnings. IBM earnings. Gosh, what would IBM do in their first COVID quarter here? Well, pretty darn good. And which division would lead? Of course, it would be cloud and software. Well, kind of. Gosh, I feel like I'm narrating a book or something. No, IBM Z was up 69% for the quarter, and hardware and systems come in and save the day. I don't want to take any credit away from cloud and cognitive, but when you put cloud and cognitive, we're only up 3%. Cloud by definition was up 30%. Red Hat was a double digit. The services divisions just tanked. GBS, GTS, global financing, all were down big time. But I tell you, I'm happy to see Red Hat at double digits. I'll be honest, and not that I'm not always honest, I always am, but I want to reiterate, I need to see that Red Hat number at a 20% or 30% growth to be more aligned with the growth areas in other business. What's your take, Daniel?
Yeah, Pat, this was interesting. So CEO Arvind Krishna came in literally weeks before COVID and just ahead of this first earnings call. And what a predicament to have to actually deliver earnings in your first few weeks and then deliver guidance when sudden pandemic was onset and the whole market architecture was changing. And unlike Microsoft, IBM is almost entirely dependent on enterprise business. There is no frontline. There's not even like a Windows or Office that's kind of used by everybody. This is a product that is business to business. This is a hand-to-hand combat. IBM has one of the largest employee bases in the world because of the sales complexities of the IBM product lines. Of course, GDS and GTS took a whack because that's a high-touch sales model with people on site delivering value-added services and deployments, and that had to stop because nobody was on site anywhere. Having said that, without real guidance, because there was no real guidance, the company did push above what Refinitiv was looking for, both in revenue by about $500 million, which is impressive, and then an earnings coming in just ahead of analyst expectations by about a dime at $2.18. Now, you pointed out Z, which I totally expected that number to be very, very good, but that was, we do have to put a little bit of a pause on that and say that is a cyclical thing. That revenue was known going into this quarter. And the real question was, did any customers delay or cancel orders? Because that's a 6, 12, 18-month sales cycle in most cases. And it looks like customers continue to take in and receive these new Z15 boxes. And these are big dollars, big margins. And by the way, that business has carried IBM's numbers a number of times over the past 6 to 8 quarters. I love what you said about Red Hat. Red Hat's not only going to push IBM's cloud, which IBM cloud needs to grow. The company needs to push to be number 3. That's where it should be focused on right now. It's too far behind right now, AWS and Azure. But if it can get the solid 3rd spot, that's the push it should be making against Google and against Oracle and against some of the other big. That's what they're all boxing for. Red Hat is a distinct opportunity. And your point about 30%, Red Hat is not just about IBM Cloud. Red Hat is about every cloud on the planet.
That's
and
right.
The company needs to be deeply part of AWS's ecosystem, Azure's ecosystem, Oracle's ecosystem. It needs to be deeply part of HPE, Dell, Cisco. Everybody that's building hybrid cloud, multi-cloud applications needs to be. IBM needs to be pushing them to do it on Red Hat. And so I love that, Pat. The growth was good. I want to see it get even better because that will be an indicator that IBM is getting its sticky fingers into every single hybrid deployment on the planet, which it should be aspiring to do.
Good analysis, Daniel. And just to be fair, I have the same complaint about VMware, right? Which it should be part of everybody's cloud. And I'm so glad you said that, Daniel. It's not just about IBM. It literally should be about Redshift everywhere.
Yes, and OpenShift. We should make sure we say that because I think Redshift's an Amazon database.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Well, you know what?
Edit that. Edit that.
What? You're not perfect?
No, I know.
Come on.
It's okay. We can edit that out. No, actually leave it in there. I'm not always right, but on the things that do matter, I am. How about that?
Sure.
By the way, I've that statement, Daniel. I just pull the string out of the back of my head and let that one rip.
Hey, by the way, at the end of my segment on the next part of our Brian Sozzi, the anchor on Yahoo Finance, said to me that I'm always right. I was very pleased with that. By the way, I just want you to, whenever a TV anchor, if I get the CNBC guys to say that, I'm gonna be really happy.
It always scares me when somebody says that to me, and I do pull the thing. I'm not right on everything, but just the things that matter.
I love it.
Okay, let's jump into Intel. We are having a fun time here talking about ourselves, but let's jump into Intel earnings. So how would Intel do? My gosh, they had 3 straight quarters of these ridiculously high upsides in their data-centric business and cloud and carrier. How did they do? Daniel, I'll let you kick this one off now.
This is like a tale of 2 earnings calls. So I'll start off and we'll talk about the earnings themselves. were very good. I mean, you're talking record-breaking quarters in its non-volatile memory group, in its data-centric group, in its client computing group. It beat revenue $1.23 a share, returning way higher than other companies in the semiconductor space, if I may add. It beat revenue by over $1 billion, but
their stock must have been up.
It got slaughtered on the backside of it. And Pat, you and I did a lot of post-mortem on this, whether it's the rounds on TV or with journalists. And the company came back, and what ended up starting off as a great result from the company financially ended up being a little bit of a financial bloodbath from the analysts, because it announced a series of delays on its 7 nanometer, pushing it out another 12 months and another 6 months on the actual build. And this became a crisis of trust and confidence in the marketplace. Now, Pat, I think you and I are more bullish and optimistic as a whole, but that really did become the story. The company did great. The result was great. The delay, though, has everybody a little bit freaked out, which ended up seeing the stock, I think it fell like 16%, Pat. And I'll let you weigh in first on this, but it was a very interesting sort of second wave, because nobody talked on the earnings call about the result. Everybody wanted to talk about 7 nanometer, which went to show that that was a big hitch to Intel's next move.
That's right, Daniel. This was all about trust. And, you know, I look at it like 9 lives, which is as long as Intel could keep having incredible financial results, which they had, slips didn't matter. And there were 3 resets on 10 nanometer in the last few years. And this is the one that hurt. This is where everybody reset their spreadsheets and just lacked confidence. Now, the pragmatic challenge was that with these 7 nanometer products are some of Intel's newest designs, including what was supposed to be its data center graphics. Now, we've now come to learn on the call, and it's funny, some people took this big idea that Intel would use some external fabs as new news. There's nothing new about this. Intel has been doing South Bridges, they've been doing ASICs, they've been doing fixed function, other fixed function accelerators at different fabs for a while. And oh, by the way, I didn't hear CEO Bob Swan also talk about that this is a massive, I didn't hear him say 50% of all manufacturing in 2022 is going to go over to fabs. External fabs or foundries, there was none of that. So I guess I just see this as a complete overcorrection, but I think the problem is that we were in the know before and saw this in the first place. So I wouldn't panic if I'm a customer, but pragmatically, if you didn't already have a second source idea in your mind, you have to get on this. And this is nothing but goodness for AMD. And we'll see financially over the next 2 years if they're able to capitalize on this. Their earnings are this week, and we'll see what they did. But yeah,
I want to touch on it quickly, Pat, because you said some really smart things. First of all, yes, AMD's stock went up almost conversely. So as Intel's went down, it was like 16 down and up. It was crazy. Like the money was just being moved. But listen, you know, Intel's 10 nanometer has finally arrived in a lot of instances. There's a lot of confusion, Pat, and you're one of the people that actually I credit a lot of the education here, that Intel's 10 nanometer plus technology is very much on par with the 7 nanometer that AMD is marketing in a lot of capacities. And so, well, yes, the 7 to 5 to 3 is going to continue to keep Intel a little bit further behind the fold. They're not as far behind as it sounds. It's not quite as far as the market is interpreting it. And you being a semiconductor legend, you probably could explain it better than me, and I'll let you quickly if you want. But the only other thing I wanted to say about it is, Intel has a stickiness factor in data center, a stickiness factor with consumer trust. It's not going to just be like, oh, we're upset and we're just going to bail. I wrote a piece about AMD and why I thought they missed their moment, because had a number of misses with its delivery of chips, and it's managed to keep a lot of its market share with only some small slips in client and small slips in data center, Pat. And I don't know what's going to change here, but I do think investors finally punished the company, but I'm not sure that's going to be the same with customers.
Yeah, thanks for that tee up. So first of all, the whole notion of nanometers in chip manufacturing is completely a misnomer. It used to be that the gate width used to be relevant. For instance, 28 nanometer chip, there was actually 28 nanometer on most of the circuits, but you can completely throw that out the window. What I do is I equate Intel 10 nanometer process with TSMC 7 nanometer for that very reason. And it gets down to density and things like that. Now, with that said, again, none of this is good for Intel, okay? It's just this notion of how bad is it really? And the other thing I want to point out is that Intel has kept 95% server market share using its 14 nanometer chips against AMD's 7 nanometer chips, okay? And I'm not saying that that's going to continue. AMD is gaining share, albeit not at a rate that you would expect, nor at the rate that, let's say, Opteron did 10 to 15 years ago. And what that really points out, Daniel, is that it's not necessarily having the best technology. It's not necessarily about having the best product. It's not necessarily about having this the best solution. It's a myriad of factors that goes into why an OEM, enterprise data center, or an enterprise even client manager in, let's say, a Bank of America would make its decisions. And I think we're seeing this play out today. It's not just about the tech.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And by the way, I just appreciate you making that clarification, because that's something that everybody just spouts numbers, and it's not a speed and feed. It's not a binary thing. So we'll move on. I know we could probably spend a whole show on this one, but
yeah, let's not. Let's move from chips to software and services. IBM and Adobe had a huge announcement last week. And, it's funny, Daniel, when I first looked at it, I literally just wrote it off as, okay, it's another strategic alignment, blah, blah, blah. But once I dug in and started to really piece this apart, and I followed it from what IBM is trying to do with the cloud to IBM's financial services cloud, right, which is kind of a vertical, to what Adobe, oh, by the way, the people that lead with PDFs, that when we get a home loan, we're writing, we're signing 125 different times to, wow, how about if we truly digitally transform this type of industry? And it got me pretty excited. And I'll one more sentence, Daniel, and I know you wrote a really good research note on this, and then got me thinking, if IBM would run this very similar play to go all the way from the edge all the way, and I don't mean the compute edge, but the edge of cloud, and then go all the way down to the specific application and the specific workflow and transform that, would be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, so the partnership was really about layering on new capabilities to the company's financial services public cloud, and it's really about being able to move workloads. You're talking about an industry where about 10% of workloads right now are in the public cloud. And so what IBM has really done is taken its know-how. Remember, we were talking about Z and mainframes and what IBM does there. Well, the company's really started building a bridge for the financial industry, which enables its cloud to be able to utilize, so utilizing OpenShift, utilizing IBM's on-prem, and then partnering it up with the cloud, building cloud-native apps, and making them compliant and fit regulatory requirements, which are incredibly complex. And if you're listening to our show, you're probably somewhat aware of this. But what we haven't really been able to do is build workloads that are more about customer. So the first thing we're trying to do is build workloads that just allow certain things to be done in cloud, things that are going to be more convenient, faster, deal with sovereignty, data location, migration, things that are typically been unable to be done in cloud. But now we're talking about all this other data. So we have all this other customer data that businesses have been collecting and paying for, and it sits in different repositories. And one of the biggest ones is Adobe's Experience Cloud. The company is one of the biggest on the planet for customer experience software. And being able to utilize that concurrently, to be able to personalize offerings, to be able to make sure that customers are having the most capabilities within the apps, within their mobile applications, being able to see real-time data visualization of your account data, if you're a customer, a business customer, and then being able to tie it to the best offers and things like that. Well, you need more data than just the, just the specific application data that has been in that kind of first wave, Pat. And so this partnership really does open the door to the people using IBM's cloud for financial services to really start layering in customer experience level digital transformation. It sounds buzzy, it is a little buzzy, but this is very, very much a necessary step in order for customers to start getting more from the transformations that these big banks are making in terms of investing in utilization of public cloud. So it's a big moment, and it's a moment I expect more, and I think we've talked about this a few times, Pat, but these industry-based vertical applications in cloud, this is going to be somewhat of the rage, I think, when it comes to hybrid, because we've all sort of agreed that hybrid's going. It's going forward, but doing more with hybrid and doing more of what we did on-prem in hybrid is going to be the next big wave, and that's going to be verticalized cloud offerings.
Yeah, I appreciate you up-leveling the conversation from my PDF loan. But I got to tell you, man, I hear the word digital transformation and my eyes glaze over. Applying it to something, even though, I think you coined the phrase or were one of the first.
Come on, I'm like top 5 most transformational digital transformation people.
There we go. Yeah.
So let's talk more about it, huh?
I'm not going down that rat hole. No, let's move on to some other important announcements. Daniel, you and I both virtually attended Microsoft Inspire. Inspire is Microsoft's channel lineup, channel event. And so, you had a lot of the sales folks, the marketing folks getting up here, but more importantly, and I think more relevant for us, we had some very important product announcements, primarily around Dynamics and Power Platform. And Dynamics and Power, and Daniel, you had mentioned the Dynamics number. Dynamics is a $3 billion business run rate, which is huge, and that doesn't even include the Power Platform. So I'm going to be really interested when they let that cat out of the bag. And in the spirit of getting a little bit more vertical and getting a little bit more, I would say, overt in solutions, Microsoft this week announced essentially ready-to-work Power Platforms. And if you're familiar with the Power Platform is software and services that allow you to do low code and in some cases no code when you look at things like Power Automate to turn somebody who knows how to do a pivot table into essentially an application developer. And it solves the problem in that we have all these applications that enterprises need to have, yet we just don't have the number of programmers out there. And what Microsoft did for Inspire is they pretty much pre-packaged a few applications to get people back to work. Pretty exciting stuff, and I'll leave the rest to you, Daniel, including Dataflex.
Yeah, so there was a number of announcements, and like you said, it wasn't just about Dynamics, but that's an area that we've been leaning into and focusing on a little bit more. It's an area that I'm particularly bullish on. If you want to read my Market Watch column, you can read it with great pleasure and or disdain because people read it both ways. But I think Microsoft in the CRM space and in the ERP space is becoming a player to watch. And as by a player to watch, I mean, within 3 years, much like it was able to do in a short period of time with cloud, it could rise up to be one of, if not the biggest competitor in the space. A couple of the announcements, Pat, you hit it. A lot of verticalized offerings around retail, around manufacturing, around fraud protection, around customer experience management. The company rolled out an offering that's competitive to Qualtrics, which, by the way, SAP has talked now about spinning off and making a public, going public, but yet still holding the vast majority of its shares. One of the other interesting things, Pat, you didn't mention that is really interesting was the Power Platform is now being used to enable return to work. So you're starting to see some of the most progressive companies, including Microsoft, delivering turnkey solutions that companies can deploy to be able to open up the workplace again. We are in this phase of COVID that seems to be a little bit uncertain, but what we do know is as we're sort of managing the healthcare and the science response, we're going to also have to get the economy churning again. This is a balancing act. So companies like Microsoft are leading the way. Well, the Power Platform for companies that are using Power Platform and Dynamics are actually able to have a systemic way to open workplace again with the most safety and data-driven approach possible. And the company's basically baking that in. So if you're a user, you don't even have to pay for that. And that's, of course, a really interesting thing. And being that it's Power Platform, it's very little code, very little, development needed to be able to roll this out custom for your business. So that, Pat, on top of some of the other vertical solutions, was one of the really interesting announcements I saw at this year's Inspire event. But overall, what I'm really just getting a sense of is momentum. The momentum that is going on, again, in this particular area of Microsoft, it's been sort of a mooted area. It's been like quietly doing well each quarter, and every quarter it's double digit and this and that, but everyone's Azure, everybody's Office, everyone's Teams. Well, this particular area of the business, I'm starting to think the company is viewing as an opportunity. Some of its competitors maybe have become too complacent. Microsoft has huge momentum. Pat, we talked about hybrid cloud. So I'm leaning on the fact that hybrid cloud as the winning platform for architecture is going to open the door for companies that can offer the greatest solution for hybrid and multi-cloud. And Arc and Azure have put the company in a unique, distinct advantage. And you're seeing more and more companies, Pat, that are actually users of platforms like Salesforce that are also embracing Power Platform. So what I started to think about is, well, if they're already using Azure and Power Platform, what's to stop the shift over to, say, a Dynamics 365? And that's going to be an interesting number to watch, Pat. But the announcements to me shows an indication that the company is getting more and more weight behind this area of the business. And stay tuned. 3 years from now, let's come back and let's analyze what I said. In the meantime, I want no scrutiny.
Yeah, so hey, there we go. I did want to mention Microsoft Dataflex. So Microsoft had a common data service, otherwise known as CDS, and essentially Dataflex is a rebranding of that. But that's not necessarily the news, but it's the fact that it's a relational database that is essentially a holding ground, and that relational database is managed and governed like enterprise data should be. And it gives the ability for teams using Power Platform to create applications. And if you can imagine even an onboarding application through Teams that you could build, or an expense automation type of process using Power Automate or something like that, I think is incredibly powerful. And the great part is, if you don't want to do the heavy lift of an SAP or an Oracle database, you can essentially surround all these services and build your applications. So, Daniel, I'm talking really fast to get us out of here because we are way over our allotted time.
Oh, no. 5 minutes long, Pat.
I know. But I just want to thank all of our listeners out there and viewers if you're watching us on YouTube. We appreciate you, and we are hoping you like it. And if you did, please hit that subscribe button. Hit the damn button and share it with your friends and your families and your loved ones. For now, though, we are out of here. Thanks.